Okay, we're just going to wait a bit for more people to join before we start. Alrighty. So, hi everyone, welcome. I always do this. Good morning if it's morning time, good afternoon if it's afternoon, and good evening if it's evening. I'm speaking from Prague, so it's evening here. And welcome to the Women in Leadership webinar today. We are going to be talking about how to put your best self forward. And we have three beautiful, strong, and wonderful women with us today, and they're going to teach us how to do that and how best we can put ourselves forward. So we have Rajini here, we have Melanie, and we have Kara. So I will let them introduce themselves so we can know them better. Yeah, so Rajini, you could start.
Of course. Hi, my name is Ragni. I am from JP Morgan Chase, and I work in technology. I lead a variety of different data products, and I'm located in the New York metro area. So welcome to this webinar. This is my first time doing that, and I'm quite excited at the opportunity to speak with all of you about how to put your best self forward. But before we talk about what your best self is, I would like to do a little bit of an exercise and just introduce what is your whole self? Who are you? And that requires a level of self awareness. So, what I would recommend each one of you do, maybe today or sometime during this week, is figure out a list of characteristics that you think best describe who you are. And then, secondly, poll your closest peer group, your family, your friend, people whom you work with, and see how they would describe you. The conjunction of these two sets of characteristics is your whole self. That's who you are. And this is going to be unique to every single person. I'm going to have a different set of attributes than Melanie or as Kara might have it. So once you've done this exercise, you want to remember there is no strengths or weaknesses. It's just situations. So the second aspect of that best self of you is going to be how you apply this in a situation. I'll give you an example. Someone might quote you as being emotional. Emotional is not a strength or a weakness. It's just how you apply that emotion in a given situation. If you talk to a friend and they're relating some personal story with you, you absolutely want to show that emotion. You want to be compassionate about it. But in a different situation, you might want to be as cool as a cucumber. So that's my 2 cents on what I think best self means, and a little bit of homework if you want to do something after the webinar. With that, I'll pass it on to Melanie.
So much, Rodney, and hi everyone, wherever you are around the globe. It's so great to see all of you and have this opportunity collectively to be together. I am here just outside of Seattle right now. I am with Microsoft, and I've had prior lives in finance as well as owning my own company for a decade as a technologist myself, but now here working at Microsoft every single day, I get to wake up and help others. I get to help them figure out how they're going to transform their customers, how they're going to be on the cusp of technology and have those companies continue to be competitive in their business. And I wake up every single day waiting for the moment where we get to try new things and break new ground. So really looking forward to hearing the questions that you have today and just kind of expanding on Ragini's point around, what is your best self? To me, I often find my best self is not necessarily defending, what I do every single day, but showing the truth of what that is. For example, yesterday I ran into a situation where there was a question that came up around one of our businesses, and I had a choice whether I could defend it or I could say, there's really truth to this, and here's what we're seeing from the point of view, rather than taking that stance and defending it and trying to say, no, that's not true, because that's a form of leadership. And so when we think about putting our best self forward, at least in my point of view, it's really taking a look at How can we show strength and acceptance for the situation as it is, rather than take that defensive approach and always trying to stand our ground, rather than, you know, showing that truth and shedding light and be accepting of everything around us. So passing it over to Kara, to you.
Great, thanks, Melanie. Hi, I'm Kara Suro. I work for Charles Schwab. I am located in San Francisco, and yes, I did in fact sneak into the office for this presentation. It was a great excuse to come and get a little bit of peace and quiet. But I oversee our fraud surveillance and investigations organization for the entire firm. So we cut across business lines. We handle fraud investigations from start to finish. We work really closely with our business partners to look at efforts to prevent, remediate, and then mitigate fraud against our clients, and then also any instances of attempts against the firm. So it's a really fun space to be in. It transgresses all firms and industry. It's not just singular to financial services. So I love these opportunities to get on calls and do presentations with folks from different areas and different industries to just kind of hear what's going on in their world. I was a securities defense lawyer as when I first started out my career, and have since moved away from being a lawyer. I might have a little bit of PTSD still, but putting that behind me. I'm kidding, of course. Anyway, so as far as putting your best self forward, you know, to touch a little bit on what Melanie said, I think it's really important to realize that as you're making those efforts, sometimes it's not easy to put your best self forward. We all kind of have days where, you know, we might be a little bit tired, we might be feeling a little bit off. It might be more difficult to show up as your best self, but you always want to keep in the back of your mind that the impression you give to others is what they're going to pass on in conversations and interactions with people you know and with people you don't know. And so when you talk about or think about, you know, how do I position myself well within the firm? How do I position myself well within the industry? One of those things you always want to have at the back of your mind is, am I putting myself forward? Am I making efforts? Am I helping others? Am I leaning into situations? But are you also having those difficult conversations, like Melanie said? You know, it doesn't mean that you're always being the yes person. Having those harder conversations, those authentic, true conversations, really goes a long way into actually putting your best self forward and really positioning yourself within a firm. So Joyce, I'll hand it back over to you now.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was beautiful. So welcome once again, every participant. Now we are just going to move to because we want this to be like a discussion forum. So if you have any questions, you have the Q&A box. Please type your questions there, and Melanie, Rajni, and Kara would help us to answer them. So thank you so much for that already. And we have a few questions already, so we will start with that. So through the discussion, if anyone have any question, use your Q&A box. But if you would like to ask your question, you know, verbally, you can just raise your hand and I will unmute you so you could ask your question verbally. Yeah. So the first question we have here for you, Melanie, is do you feel that self-branding is an important component, you know, to positioning yourself within an organization?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I'm just reflecting on my career over the years, and it's transformed and evolved, right? From, you know, being a financial analyst to owning a business, and now, you know, being within a company that everyone recognizes. So, you know, personal branding in all three of those instances, chapters of my life, so to speak, been incredibly important.
I think she's having some.
I think to the point that Ragini made, you know, when you talk to peers, when you talk to others, and you get that feedback, the question usually comes up of, you know, what is their experience working with you? What is that experience as they interact with you on a daily basis? Are you kind to them? Do you listen to them? Do you share insights with them, or do you keep it close to your vest? So I think personally, every single moment that you interact with someone throughout the day is your personal branding moment. And when it comes time for reviews, people are going to have a point of view for you. They're going to have a point of view that's positive or that's going to be negative. And sometimes it can be the work is great, but the attitude isn't. And so, if we take that moment to consider every interaction is a branding opportunity for you. And if it's negative to date, it gives you the opportunity to change it. Especially at a point in time here in the States now where, we have a holiday and it's kind of a mental reset for people. It gives us that perfect opportunity to reflect and then to decide, how we want to see ourselves and how we want others to see us. So that would be my first. The second would be, and Kara had mentioned this, how can you serve others? If you come from a place, if you walk in the door every day and from a place of how can I help you through that lens, that makes it, I think, very interesting compared to, what is everyone doing for me? So it's a much different way of thinking. It's a much different approach. And sometimes that itself is not easy, and that takes some time to change the mindset around that. But I would say if you could come from a place, at least from my learning, if you can come from a place of helping and serving others, it benefits you as well, because you're not just, getting the benefit of helping that person, but you might learn something along. You might be able to embrace something new you didn't learn before too. So all goodness there. And then the last point I'd make is raise your hand. When it comes to self-branding, if you're able to volunteer for something, if you're able to raise your hand, if it's something small like an analysis or leading a project or being part of a project that you may or may not know anything about, all of those play a critical role, I think, in self-brand, especially if you want others to see you as a positive, strong leader. Those are all great opportunities to take advantage of, so if there is any opportunity to volunteer for anything, whether it be outside of the office or inside of the office, that's always helpful too. So hopefully that helped people.
Yeah, thank you. So we have questions coming in now. So I will just go through the first set and then we can continue with other questions. So this is for you, Rajni. How can someone influence their position through networking and relationships?
Okay, that's a very important one, especially as we take a lead role in the workplace. So I will describe three elements of a network as I see it, and these are my 2 cents, of course, my views. The first one is have a strong peer network. And I alluded to that previously when I was talking about how do you assess and be self-aware. That's a very strong network, a peer-to-peer network where you can be brutally honest about your successes and failures and discuss how to do best. So these could be people at work that watch you on a day-to-day basis. It could be your team. It could be people that work for you, or even sometimes your managers and other people in the leadership position. That's one set. The second element is having sponsors. Sponsors are people that advocate for you. They are not to be confused with mentors. And then I'll just talk about mentors first and then try to contrast the difference between a sponsor and a mentor. So the third element, obviously, is a mentor. Mentor is someone who coaches you and guides you, watches you as you fail through things or you're having a difficult time with, and then coaches you on how you can evolve and come out of it. A sponsor doesn't do that. A sponsor doesn't shine a spotlight on your weaknesses or areas of improvement. A sponsor takes the whole you and advertises or markets you. So having these three elements in your network will really help you become extremely successful. And to top it all, in order to get that network, don't just do it because you found someone that is senior and you thought that that would be an excellent sponsor. Do it organically, meaning you might have core attributes about yourself that you like, and then you end up forming connections at work that you appreciate in other people. They may not be same, they may be sometimes very different, or things that you aspire to be or you appreciate. Pick those people, because it's much more easier to build a network with someone you like and appreciate and respect than with someone that you can't really click and you can't have a connection. especially when you're going to that peer-to-peer network and your mentor group. Those two groups need to be something that you can connect with, be frank with, and be honest about how to succeed and how to do better. So I would say those three things are really going to help you with getting a good supportive network. Of course, an important element to enable this networking is communication. So working on your communication style is one thing I recommend for everyone. Record yourself, see how you do things, what's your body language look like? Do you get to the point quickly or not? And I'll say this because we're in this constant evolving world where instant gratification is needed. Everybody wants to get the data now, the page must be downloaded now, and if the wheel is spinning, it's so frustrating. That's really what has happened to us, our communication style as, I guess, in this generation, I would say. So think of your communication to be succinct, get to the point, and then form those collaborative elements of your network that I discussed.
All right, great. Thank you for that. Rajani, just before I go to Kara, I have a question here for you. It says, because you spoke about sponsors, so what woman inspires you and why?
Oh, that's a good one. We have a very first CIO, Laurie Beer, in JP Morgan. She's truly an inspirational woman. I have met her a few times, and she has definitely set the standard for women in leadership position, at least at JP Morgan Chase. But also, I would like to say we start learning at home. So obviously, my mother, she was a teacher, and she was a very strong woman. She knew what she wanted. But at the same time, she had that right balance that I see. It's not being strong and super assertive, but also being able to be soft when needed. So the grooming happens at home. You learn from your examples at home. And then, of course, as you move into the industry, you have some examples.
Right, great.
That question.
So, yeah, so one last one for you, sorry. So someone didn't get the third network component. So you said mentor, sponsor, and what was the third one?
Your peer-to-peer network. So
okay.
Yeah, that's your immediate circle. Yeah.
All right, and the follow-up question on that is, 1 second, I lost the question. Okay, I can always come back to that. So I will just go to Kara. We have a question for you. So your question is, how does leadership play into the concept of putting your best self forward?
Great, thanks. So one thing I want to point out is that leadership does not necessarily mean that you are a manager of people. You don't have to have direct reports in order to be a leader. You can be in an individual contributor role and still be a very effective leader within your firm or even within your industry. And so part of that is having your relationships, leading into those relationships. So one thing I always ask people is, as a leader, are you a ladle or a sponge? Are you giving, to the pot, or are you taking away? Are you doing things that you see at the end are going to get you to where you want to be in your career, or are going to be some benefit to you? Or are you really helping others for the sake of helping others? Are you leaning into another team that you might not necessarily have that much interaction with, but you can lend some of your resources or some of your capabilities in order to help them out for the good of that team and for the good of the firm? And I think people see that, and I think that's a trait of true leadership, where someone can kind of put themselves aside and really contribute to the greater good and to help and drive initiatives forward. If you're doing something that's for you at the end of the day, people are going they're going to pick up on that. They're going to see through the veil, and they're going to know that you're doing something that isn't necessarily for the benefit of all, but you're giving to get. And that's not necessarily a position you want to be in. And so in order to be in a leadership position and a position of influence, to enact change throughout a firm or to get some sort of project across the line, part of that then lends back to putting your best self forward, nurturing those relationships. As Melanie said, having those difficult conversations and not saying yes to go along, but really kind of making valid points. And all of that wraps itself into leadership. So I think it's a really valuable component of putting your best self forward.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Kara. I will just take the second part of the question that was directed to you, Rajani. So someone would like to know, how do you have an example of how you build this relationship? So the mentor relationship, the sponsor relationship, how do you build it?
How do I build it?
Yeah.
Yeah, yes. And like I said, most of my work relationships grew organically. So I probably met someone in a meeting and I thought that they were really impactful. And I was struggling with, how to be more influential in these senior leadership meetings. Another one I formed while I was up for some interview, surprisingly. And then during that conversation, we connected. So, like I said, a lot of this happens with, more organically that you do it, the better it is, as opposed to going through the mentor program. My personal view was the firm does have a very elaborate mentor program. I'm sure a lot of people have that. That's kind of like setting you up for a blind date. So you have no idea what you're going to get into. But if you meet people on a day-to-day basis that someone has introduced you to, or you're part of a meeting, you have a first meeting with them and you set up, try to suss it out, whether they could be a good mentor or a sponsor, and then you formally ask them. At some point, I did a couple of one-on-ones, and when I felt like it was really building on, I specifically asked the person if they were willing to be my sponsor, and they said more than happy. But we had a discussion about what the sponsor role means, and they were very clear about it, that a sponsor is not necessarily a mentor because they want to advocate for me, and it's okay to say no or turn off a relationship if you don't feel it's going to give you the value. That's also okay to do. You don't have to say anything about it, just like not me, but work on building that. And sometimes I'm watching the Q&A. Someone asked a question: is, can the same person be a mentor and sponsor? Absolutely, they can be, but make sure that the situation is clear. So for a personal example from mine, I have a person who is a sponsor as well as a mentor. But when they're in the sponsor role, which is when they're at the table with the leadership, when I'm not presented or I'm not there, their role as a sponsor is to make sure they advocate for me and say, yes, this product that she's leading is really good. She's doing a fantastic job. We should give this opportunity to her. Whereas separately, they might come back to me and say, well, in order for you to succeed in this role, I think you need more executive presence. Right. And that's really a key distinction. The same person can do it, and that could be really helpful, but they should know when to do it. They shouldn't be going at the leadership table and saying, well, yes, she can do it, but she needs more executive presence. That's not helping you. So as long as they understand the distinction, they can absolutely do it.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. So the next question we have here is for Melanie. I think the person is trying to say is being, when someone maybe tells you it's nice to work with you, I think, is it a compliment? I think that's what the person is trying to say.
My interpretation of that would be, yeah, that is a compliment. I think there could be a different point of view, but yeah, I would say, overall, being nice to work with is good. What it means is that, you're most likely collaborative, and you partner very well. You listen and you try and help, and then at the same time, you're finding a way to most likely navigate what their needs are, maybe against their metrics or their KPIs, and how your work also complements all of that. So at the end of the day, it sounds like you're finding a way to partner and collaborate with someone, and that's more than likely a compliment, would be my my suggestion there.
Okay, that's great.
I may add something to that. Just being nice to work with is not going to be enough. So just to complement on what Melanie said, is that the nice comes with effective. Yes, you have to be collaborative and you should do the most professional, set the highest example of teamwork, but you have to be effective in that partnership, being able to deliver. So if you hear someone say about you, oh, she's really nice to work with, and that's it, full stop, and they don't say anything else, like, I thought she was very clear and articulate, or she knew the strategy, or she knew what she was talking about, then it's a partial compliment. It's not a whole compliment. You wanted to talk about more about your work, not just about how you deal with it.
Yeah, and just to add to what Ragini is saying. Sometimes you might hear those additional components that Ragini is referring to if it's a manager level, if it's an individual contributor, that may be as much as you get. It's nice to work with, and that may be something on that person that you're working with, right? Like they just aren't aware that if there's something more that needs to be said, that's a coaching opportunity for them, right? To learn those gifts that Ragini is mentioning. At the end of the day, you want to be, to her point, you want to be known as the one who is effective and impactful and follows through and, has accolades like there's no tomorrow. Sometimes, unfortunately, just depending on, what the situation is and the level, that they may not be there yet, at least from one of the learnings I've found along the way. But to Ragini's point, most effective when you can get every accolade that goes along with that.
Great.
Well, I think it's also a really good opportunity where if you hear a compliment like that, you can also go to that person and take it to the reverse and say, thanks so much for the compliment. I really appreciate it. Is there anything that you would recommend that I do better or that I do differently? Maybe you don't want to say better, right? Or is there anything I could have tweaked in that presentation that would have made it more effective? Or is there, something I could have brought to the table that would be more impactful for the team? It's a really nice because it opens the door to have that conversation and to get some additional feedback from someone potentially.
Great, thank you. I will take this one for Kara. It says, I'm a young woman in a male-dominated industry, and I'm the only woman on the leadership team at our company. And I often find that my opinion is overlooked or I'm talked over. Do you have any suggestions on how to become more visible and heard?
Yeah, that is a tough one. Sadly, it is not uncommon. I think don't ever give up would be my first comment. Just because you're talked over, you feel like your opinion isn't heard, make sure you keep voicing your opinion. But you may also find that you need to leverage your relationships and your networks and sort of socialize concepts outside of the meetings, right? The senior leadership meetings where this happens in a lot of organizations where topics will come up in leadership meetings or in team meetings, and all of a sudden a decision is made and people are like, wait, how did that happen? Well, it's because people are talking sort of behind the scenes, right? They're having conversations with their peers. They're raising issues initially. And so if there are certain individuals who you do align with and who you feel are actually hearing you, so maybe there's one or two people in that meeting who you feel like are giving credibility to your and really listening to what you're saying, you might want to talk to them before the meeting or even after the meeting. If you say you spoke up and you got talked over again, circle back with some of those individuals who you feel you might have a better connection with and who really seem to be giving value to what you're saying, and maybe try to channel that relationship and use your influence in that regard. But again, don't give up in those meetings. It is also okay to at some point, if you feel like you're being spoken over, to say, hey, would you mind if I finished my line of thought? And then I'd love to hear what you have to say. But do you mind if I just finish this? You want to make sure that you don't. I was in a call the other day where someone got interrupted, and the person who got interrupted said, let me finish what I'm saying. And I was like, whew, I was just an observer. So, and I actually talked to that person after, and I said, I feel like you probably could have softened that and just said, hey, I'd love to hear what you say, but do you mind if I finish getting my thought across? And so that's another opportunity if you feel like people are continually speaking over you. If you call them out on that, but you do it in a non-aggressive and a polite way, it's going to make them stop. They're not going to be able to keep talking. So that might help as well.
All right. Rajini and Melanie, do you have anything to add to that, or do I move to the next question?
I think Kara said some excellent points there. Another thing I do recommend is practicing your body language. It does matter. Your posture matters. Sometimes when there's a lot of dialogue going on, you can do this. You can totally raise your hand and say, I have something to say, and I've been trying to get it out there. You don't have to be too adverse about it, but you could use your body language to kind of assert that, I'm trying to make a point here. So you can do that. I totally agree with Kara that having those relationships in there so that when you come to the meeting, they support you and say, oh, I think Kara was trying to say something. Can we let her speak? That is really powerful. That's right.
Regini, you raise a really good point too about body language. So I'm cold a lot, as many of us are in these offices, right? And so I would sit in a meeting like this with my arms crossed, and my boss called me out on it. And he said, look, if you're freezing, I get it, but to the extent you can, sit kind of with your arms uncrossed, because even though your intention isn't to look closed off, you look closed off. And so I got really tried to make myself really conscious of that, and I've sort of gotten that out, except on days when I'm absolutely freezing, but then I just try and grab a sweater. The other thing I've also been trying to do, and I've watched, is women tend to get more critique for sitting with just sort of a very kind of stoic look on their face while they're listening to others, whereas men often don't get that same critique. And so I've sort of honed a little bit of a smile, and I noticed Regini and Melanie are doing it really well as they're listening to the rest of us speak. And instead of sitting there like this, you just kind of put a little smile on your face. It also shows that you're being attentive. It shows that you're kind of taking in what's being said, maybe a little nod here and there, but really being conscious of, because even when you're not speaking, you're communicating. So really being conscious of what your body language is saying about what you're thinking about the conversation and what what's going on in the room is key, is a key component to putting your best self forward.
Great, thank you. So the next question is for Rajini and Melanie. It said, how do you navigate the patriarchy that seems to exist in technology sector?
Oh, we're going to get a good laugh out of this one. Melanie,
Go first, Rajni.
Okay, so the one thing I will say helps is having your sponsors and mentors to be male. Don't feel like you need to stick with a female mentor or a sponsor, especially if it's sparse in that population. I have found throughout my career that the most powerful connections I had and the ones that advocated for me the most are male allies. And also, when you do that, be absolutely transparent about what you're trying to do here. It's not about me. I'm trying to build this team. I'm trying to build this product. I know technology. Make sure that when you speak and like someone pointed out, how do I get myself more heard? Everything that you say, especially in a noisy environment where everybody's constantly talking with everybody else, think of it like a tweet, 160 characters and impactful. Right? So now you get attention. People are like, oh, she said something that was really important. Let me hear it out. And then you can elaborate on it and summarize it, but get to the point, get to it really, really quickly. But definitely leverage your male allies on how they see you when you come into the meeting. Do they see you as this little doe-eyed intern, a little girl that came along and she doesn't know what she's doing? And if so, why? Why do they have that perception? And be transparent about that. Melanie?
Yeah. I mean, so when I grew up as a child, my dad was an executive, and everyone knew him within this industry. And the one thing he would always tell me as a little girl is that I should never be intimidated by anyone, no matter who they are. Never be intimidated by anyone, because everyone puts their pants on one leg at a time, in the exact same way. And so, as I think back, that's one thing that stuck with me. And in every single career chapter that I've had has always been male dominated, but I've never, kind of given into that, so to speak. I always take the thought of waking up every day, doing the very best that I can, and leveraging data wherever I possibly can to help make those decisions, so that when I am coming to a meeting or when I am having that conversation, that we're talking from a set of facts that we can both agree on. And so I found, moments like that very helpful along the way. But, I just personally, yes, it exists. I mean, statistically, there are more men than But, I found those opportunities to try and work the words that my father gave me as a child, and, just really trying to help wherever I can.
Great.
And I forgot to say one thing. Advocate for your peer female teams, right? Or partners or members. Advocate for each other. That's really important. If you feel like you're the one person in the leadership, try to bring someone else up to the table as well, who you think deserves it and probably didn't have that opportunity.
Great, thank you. Yeah, we have a lot of questions here. So the first one says, who are usually sponsors in life? I think Rajini spoke about that. And who will advertise for you as a whole without being your mentor?
It's and the person that chooses to advertise for you, think about what their job is. So if you were a sponsor for someone else, it's not an active engagement. It's not something that you're investing the time in the person to say, I'm going to grow you and cultivate you. They're more like advertisements of who you are. So who is going to do that? That you have to pick. You have to find that connection that's going to be unique. I typically end up choosing people that are in my partner network, people who are supporting our products. Some of them are our customers, because obviously the end goal is not just that I want them to support me, I want them to support the product, the team. That's how I end up choosing them. And who are your sponsors in life? It's your friends, your family. I think these people not just market for you, they also are really your coaches. So there may be sponsors as well as mentors. I think it really helps to come back home to talk to somebody about how your day was and what you found was a helpful interaction, because that person might have no idea what you've been through during work. So it's a completely unbiased opinion on how you reacted. And be honest with them and say, I said this, this is how I said it. And you might get some honest opinion of, maybe you should have done X, Y, and Z. So sleep over it and come back.
Okay. The next question, I mean, it's a second part of the first question, but because Kara, you spoke about communication style, so maybe you can help us with it. So it said, how can we be assertive but still soft? Is there any tip to help us draw the line or manage our communication style?
Yeah, that's a tough one, and it depends on the situation and who you're talking to, what your relationship is with them. But first and foremost, one of the things that I always tell people who ask kind of questions about communication is try to use the word I less. You can say we, or flip it to talking about the person you're interacting with, right? And instead of saying, I can get this report done for you, you can say that, hey, we can lean in on this report. What would be most helpful, right? And so elicit questions. I often find if you get others talking, you can kind of diffuse a situation. So if you're having a harder conversation, so kind of to what Melanie was saying earlier, where sometimes you have to defend what you're trying to get done. And in those situations, you want to make sure that it's a dialogue and it's kind of a back and forth and an exchange, and you're getting people to share their thoughts. That's going to make them a little bit more receptive to hearing what you have to say and what you're trying to tell them. And then also just, making sure to watch the body language of the person you're talking to as well, because you can, have sort of a very strong, assertive conversation with certain people. And you probably know those folks, right? They might be in your peer group, or, I have a peer who I'm really tight with, and, I can go to him and kind of be like, what's up? Why did you do that? Why did you send that information when it wasn't quite ready to go, or whatever it is? But we can have this kind of very strong back and forth, and really kind of provide constructive feedback to each other. Whereas with other people that I don't have quite as strong of a relationship with, I'm going to want to be a little bit softer with my language and with my tone and kind of how I'm presenting whatever it is that I'm trying to communicate across.
Yeah, and if I may add, the body language aspect is really important when you're trying to be assertive. So exactly this line that I just said, is a fact-based thing. Like I try to take the emotion out of it. I could say, you need to be less assertive like this. The body language really matters. So if you tone it down, you put a little smile, you can still say what you want to say with emphasis without it appearing to be too forceful. So practicing that body language is going to be like a constant journey.
And use it to your advantage, right? There may be some conversations where you want to sit kind of how I'm sitting in, you're back in a chair and you're making your assertive comment, but there may be other times where you want to sit up at the edge of the table if it's, a conference table and you're in the room with a number of people and you want to kind of have your hands on the table and sitting up and straight. And that sends a totally different message that is going to kind of just tie in with whatever your assertive statement is and make it even more powerful.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you for that. Next question says, what advice can you offer for someone who is new to a company in an environment where everyone is working from home? How would you approach making connections and putting your best self forward? So any of you can help out.
I'll jump in and start, and then Melanie and Regini chime in. I think in those situations where we've had new employees, a really good thing is to give that new person a list of people who will be key contacts for them, because they come in and they don't know, right? So if you have, whether it's someone in your team or maybe it's a peer or just someone that you're gonna be working with a lot, reach out to that person and say, hey, I know you're new. Here are a number of people, whether they're business partners or whether they're within the same organization, that you're probably going to have a lot of conversations with. Reach out to these people, call them up, introduce yourself, say hello. I had a boss who did that for me once. She gave me a list of 20 people and she said, okay, your task this week, it was like literally my first day. I'm still trying to set up the computer. She said, call these people. You're going to be working with them a lot. Introduce yourself. And it was one of the best things anyone had ever done for me starting a new job, because right off the bat, I had names, I had numbers, and now I had also introduced myself. So when an issue did come up, or we had some sort of fraud issue and it dealt with their region, I could pick up the phone and I wasn't this new person they never heard of. They already had a name, and that is something that you can easily do in the work from home environment. So Melanie, Regini, did you want to have anything to add on?
Yeah, I'd add on. I mean, we're all, talking to you through video. And so if there is an opportunity through your work environment using video tools, while, no one really wants to do it, because that means we might have to get dressed for the day and, we don't necessarily want to show the background of our home, but any opportunity that you have as a newcomer where you can show video, I think that probably opens the doors. There's a couple of people that have recently joined in the last 6 months in our area, and they've really struggled. And one of the pieces of feedback that they were giving was that if they were able to connect on video, then they can see the body language and they feel a stronger sense of connection with that person. So that would be one point. And then, every company size is different, and every company has different kinds of groups and initiatives that they do. Whether it is listening to leadership things, or whether it's volunteering for a common cause virtually, but any additional opportunity that the company provides, where there might be people throughout the company that are gathering in a virtual way to have a sense of camaraderie and togetherness, I think, is a fantastic opportunity to take advantage of too, realizing that you're onboarding and there's a lot going start that network connection outside of that immediate top 20 list that Kara mentioned.
Thank you. Okay, so we have someone raising her hand, so we will quickly unmute her to ask a question. Aliyah, are you ready?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hi, ladies. Thank you very much for hosting this beautiful webinar. The three of you have conducted yourselves amazingly, and it's inspirational just watching you here. I had a sort of a sensitive question. Just a quick 30-second brief about me. I'm a visible practicing Muslim, so I cover my hair when I'm outdoors, and I'm in the engineering consulting industry, which is again very male dominated. I'm finding that particularly in the case of conflict, it's getting harder and harder, not only as a woman of color, as a practicing Muslim, just to get people to see my way, and then dealing with the residual resentment that usually comes with it. So just looking for advice from you three ladies, just on how to tackle that.
Thank you for the question, Alia. I can try to take a stab at it. First of all, don't worry about that. You are you, and what you portray yourself to be is who you're going to be. It's got nothing to do with anything else. And I'll say this with the best interest. Like sometimes people look at me and they think, oh, she's young, or she's inexperienced, or she may not know technology, because there's just not that many women. And I've constantly have to deal with this unconscious bias that people might have at the back of their head. And what I do is first try not to put that unconscious bias in front of me. If I want to say something, I say it. And if I feel like it's not being heard, I do raise my hand and I make myself heard. I draw these connections and use them to leverage it, just as Kara said and Melanie said. Continue to do that. And if you feel like there is a obvious bias, no longer unconscious, there are ways to talk through that. I'm sure every organization has their process for it. I would look to leverage it if it gets really bad. But I think the very first defense is yourself. If you notice that somebody is doing something or saying something that's making you uncomfortable, or it's making you ineffective at work, make it known. Make it known to the person directly. You can do one-on-one with them and say, hey, I don't appreciate this. Is there something I should be aware of? What is stopping you from supporting this idea? Do you think the idea is bad? And just try to get a sense of where they're coming from. I think that really does help, that honest conversation. Kara, Melanie, anything you want to add?
Go ahead, Melanie. I know we unmuted at the same time. Go ahead, Melanie.
Go first.
Okay, so I was just going to say, Ragini made some really, really great points, absolutely. And the last one she made in particular, where, if you can ask, if you feel like you're getting pushback, ask those questions. Great. If you feel like you're still kind of getting sort of quote unquote pushed to the side, right? Your ideas aren't being heard or they aren't being valued, to a comment I made earlier, are there allies that you have within the organization who you can leverage and who you can work with to get your points across, maybe through a different channel, or a different team meeting, maybe working in smaller groups if you feel like the larger team meetings you're being overlooked or talked over. I think you still want to push to have your ideas heard in those larger forums, but it also never hurts to do a little bit of back channeling as well, and socialize, in a smaller group or in some of those one-on-one situations.
Yeah, and realizing to ask the question. It takes a lot of courage, I think, to ask a question like that, and and to be authentic about it. So thank you, by the way, for asking that. The one suggestion that I might make is that sometimes if we think this, our body language will resonate it, and the tone in our voice will resonate that nervousness and that hesitancy, and that
Yeah, I think we lost Melanie there. Okay.
I think she was just trying to assert the point that if you feel that you're being targeted, you change your body language changes. Sometimes you crouch, sometimes you might lower your volume when you're talking because you're nervous. Sorry, Melanie, you're back. I was just trying to cover the gap here.
Thank you. I don't know what happened. All of a sudden it just kicked out. But yeah, I mean, the only and thanks by the way for chiming in. Yeah, the only other suggestion that I could give is you know, maybe have a conversation with your manager if that's an option, if you feel safe enough to have that conversation. Again, it takes a ton of courage. It takes a ton of strength. And so if there is that safe space where you can have that conversation with your manager and get some additional, you know, insights or ways to help, that might be helpful too.
Great. Thank you so much for that. The next question is, what recommendations would you have for self-branding when only communicating through video chats? Yeah.
Self-branding through video chats, is that what it was? Sorry.
Yes, that was it.
Okay. So I can kick it off, and then obviously, Kara, Ragini, it'd be great to get anything extra from you. You know, I think, you know, just showing up, making sure that you're listening. You know, we've heard a lot of situations where people are talking over one another, and that's a commonality that can happen with tooling and in these technology times. But if there is a way that you can make sure that you're listening and that you're not multitasking when you're having the conversation with someone, that's a self-branding aspect. And so, you know, if you're able to be present wherever possible, realizing that you have to take notes, if you know, mention it to them that that is something that you need, that you'll be taking notes, and that you don't want to be offensive in that way. And then, you know, also to Kara's point, smiling. The more you can smile and the more that you can show interaction and excitement, again, all self-branding moments. And then wherever you're able to prepare ahead of time for these conversations so that you can be very thoughtful. You know, there's a lot of statistics that are running right now where, you know, people are just talking to talk and they're having meetings to have meetings. And some of those meetings are not the most effective, meaning that you're having a 30-minute time slot and there's no action at the end of it. How can you, you know, help accelerate? How can you be mindful about that? How can you be succinct? All of those tie back at the end of the day to self-branding moments in a succinct way through a video conversation in a limited duration of time, and you're still continuing to move things forward. At the end of the day, all of that, you know, shines great accolades and light for the great work that you're doing, and that reflects on you and the brand that you're projecting to others.
Okay, so we'll go to the next questions. We have a lot of questions. So this one is for Kara. Can you talk about building relationships with type A males in financial services environments? I found these are in many cases people that quickly dismiss others based on first impressions.
Yeah, that's a tough one. It is definitely a male-dominated industry. But you know, I think one is, and this goes for any relationship, lean in, try to find something that you can offer to help out. Maybe there's a project that was mentioned. Volunteer to help out on that project, even if it's a tiny little piece of it. Don't take maybe as no, right? Because if you say, hey, you mentioned this project in this meeting, I'd love to help out on that. They might say, oh yeah, maybe, you know, sounds good. Follow back up and see if there is a little role for you. And then lean in, help that team out. I do find that if, and with what I do, well, there's always a joke that, hey, we love to hear from you, but we don't actually ever want you calling us, because it means that there's been some sort of fraud situation, and things are going south. But I always try and find opportunities where I can then add to their practice, right? So I can say, hey, would you like me to do a presentation for some of your clients? I can talk about the latest fraud trends. And so a lot of our representatives have taken me up on that. But it's kind of like offering things that will it takes them off their guard, right? You're not trying to take their business. You're not trying to get in their way. You're trying to give something that helps. And when you are helping others, then those barriers tend to break down. The other thing is also just try and have a casual conversation. I find that, if you can connect on a personal level, whether it's about, where you live, or an interest in, food, wine, travel, sports, whatever it is, if you can connect with individuals on that level, male or female, of course, it's sort of an inroad into establishing a relationship. And, trying some of those tactics might help. But it's not always easy, because there certainly are men who, it's the old boys club still. And I find that they're becoming far more, few and far between. But they do still exist. And, some of those, I always make sure to say, hey, how are you doing today? I take the high road, but I know that I'm never going to infiltrate that, that circle, or, those couple of individuals. And it is what it is. And I still, provide great service. I try to be a really good partner. But sort of knowing that there are some you're just never going to crack. You're never going to crack, and just, put it away.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Next question. What type of learning or coaching initiative do you all endorse in your organization for women?
The moment someone says that we should put a coaching or learning initiative for women, I cringe. I feel like this learning and coaching should happen for the men. It's like, you guys need to be educated that women are in the workforce now for over 20, 30 years, like, get used to it. But I will say one thing. Some of this coaching and learning is focused on presenting and, being maybe more like a male and, trying to be more assertive. I would walk far away from that kind of coaching and learning. The only coaching and learning you need is, number one, your skill set. You want to make sure you're always on top of your game in terms of doing your job. Your performance and your potential should continue to grow. That should be the learning that you should invest in. If you're a developer, focus on, learning the latest languages, the newest libraries, the newest frameworks. Keep on top of it, because no one can compete with your core skill set. And the second thing I would say is maybe learn how to partner better with your teamwork. You'll learn from each other what works best. The standard things that people say, oh, you must say this, you must be confident, you should do the Superman pose in the elevator. These are all helpful tips to make you feel more like a man, but no, you don't need to do that. You can be Wonder Woman, and you can be Captain Marvel. And I think that's the only thing, just the self-learning on that aspect.
All right, thank you for that, Rajini. Next question says, women are often evaluated based on demonstrated accomplishments and versus our male peers who are likely to be evaluated on potential. How do we bridge that gap to enable us to get the opportunities to demonstrate our abilities? Anyone?
Yeah, if no one else has a thought, here's what I do, and I do it for myself, and I try to encourage my team to do it as well. I put together a list of skills that I have, which I think makes me good. These are my potential. This is not necessarily my performance. And then I do this exercise with my peer group where I say, what do you think my skills are? And then I do a third bucket, which is, what is my role? What is the role, and what is the skill set required for that role? And then what I do at the beginning of the year, which is around this time, is draw a journey to, if I want to get into that role, I think I need to improve. And I'm just going to use an example. Let's say I want to improve my executive presence. What does that mean to me? It means I want to look at some YouTube videos and see what other women are doing. How do they improve their executive presence? Maybe it's practicing, and maybe it's more experience. And the more experience, I work on that with my manager, that I just want opportunities to be able to present in a way that's that demonstrates that I'm growing in that space. So if you do this, and we call this a career development plan, it helps you get over that. And you do it in combination with your manager, you do it in combination with your mentor, sometimes with your peer network. That way, it's always well known that you're not just thinking about your career like it's, you know, a one-off thing. You're invested in it, and then you get the other person equally invested in that journey. So I think that's really important to put it on paper and wrap your head around where you need to go with it.
One thing that I will tack on here, and it's a little bit tangential, but it kind of popped into my head, is that women tend to judge themselves personally harder than men do. And I've heard this example so many times where there will be a job description, right? And a guy will look at like the 10, you know, you must have these qualifications, and there'll be 10, and the guy will have like 4 or 5, and he'll be like, all right, great, I'm going to apply. The woman will look at it. She'll have 9 out of 10, but because she's missing that 10th, she'll say, oh, I'm not qualified and I'm not going to apply. And that's a crazy, fascinating, just complete divergence of how we view ourselves. And so that's one thing to keep in mind. And I'm trying to train myself too, as I sort of, you know, look at next steps in career and kind of think along those paths. You know, and I advise this to women too, if you're looking at a job, you do not need to have all of those qualifications. Put in your resume, apply for the position, because you may have other qualities that will also contribute to that one either will make up for whatever it is you're missing, or may just be such an ad that you could get that job, but you're selling yourself short by not putting in for it, by the sheer fact that you're maybe missing 1 or 2 of, the list of qualifications they're looking for. So totally tangential, but it popped into my mind as we were talking about it.
Very good point. Very good point.
Awesome, thank you. I think this one's for Rajini. It says, how does one get a mentor or sponsor when they work for a small-sized company which doesn't have company mentorship?
Yeah, I think maybe we talked about a little bit that it has to be organic. When you don't have an official avenue to do it, you want to make your peer network your mentor and your sponsor. And if it's smaller, you have less hierarchy, which is even better. Meaning you can treat them all the same. So try that out, like find people that you can connect with and have that dialogue with them.
All right, great, thank you. The next question says, how do you juggle or manage family responsibilities, so small children, homeschooling, etc., and work priorities in order to further your career during this current market?
Well, I think first and foremost, we all need to kind of go a little bit easier on ourselves, because we are honestly trying to do it all and then some. And I think, for a lot of women, there's sort of the internal dialogue of like, I need to crush it at everything I'm doing. I need to crush it as a mom, and I need to crush it in my job. And, I've got all these other tasks that I have to do. And I think kind of letting yourself off the hook right now, is really, really key to, to just kind of being okay in this environment that we're in. And, I am a little bit of a neat freak, and you can see my office has like nothing in it. And so, I like I don't like chaos in my space, but I have a 7-year-old and an 11-year-old, and I've just had to let that go. And I'm also home all day, and so like I see, their toys and their art projects and the mess, and whereas normally I would have been like, all right, clean it up. I've kind of just said, I'm just going to put this out of view. I'm not going to look at it. I'm going to let it go. And that's on the home front. You just have to find the things that you can let go, and that you don't have to tend to. And then in the work environment, know which meetings are okay for like your child or your cat or your dog to pop into, and just be okay with that. Like there are some that I know my son's going to pop over my shoulder and it's fine. The ones that he can't, I go into another room, and sometimes we live in a small space in the city, and sometimes I'm like sitting in my bed and my laptop is perched on my pillows, and I'm trying to like, I make it look like I'm not sitting in my bed, but that's what I have to do so that I don't have, a child or a dog or something kind of getting in the way. And so I think the key is just being really flexible with sort of the environment and kind of just making it work as best you can. And people know we are all in the same situation. But it is hard because a lot of men don't have children popping into their video screen necessarily. But finding those workarounds and then just honestly going easy on yourself.
Great, thank you for that. We have the next question here, and I would like to ask Melanie this question because you spoke about your dad being an executive and telling you, you shouldn't be intimidated by others. So it says, how courageous do you have to be to get to the positions you are right now outside of your experience and education?
I guess it depends on how far you want to go. Because every step, at least from what I've found, every step that you make along the way takes courage. And depending on how far you want to go, you may have to feel fearless in order to get there. So my suggestion would be, take a look at where you're at today, where you want to be, and what it will take. And let me give you an example. When I was a financial analyst, I had somehow decided that it was time for me to start my own business. And I had my parents, I had everyone around me telling me that, I'm not sure you can do it. And it was their own projection and fear that was coming about, lack of security, and you'll be on your own, and you have to, go through this journey on your own. You don't have a company backing you and all of this, right? And it took a lot of courage and fearlessness to do it. And I did it, and I did it in New York. And there's a saying, if you can do it in New York, you can do it everywhere. And, from a success point of view. And I led it for a decade, and I did it. It took a lot. It was difficult. It took a lot of fearlessness in that case. So, I think it really just depends on what you want to do from my point of view. But if you can take an objective look at where you're at now and where you want to be and what that journey might look like, is that a couple of career steps forward? Is that 4 or 5 career steps forward? Is it starting your own business? So, I just think it'll depend based on what the scenario is for how much courage you really need. At the end of the day, it takes a lot of courage regardless, in my opinion, to even change jobs. Getting a promotion takes courage because there's some fear that initially comes up about, do I really have it? Can I really do it? And there's some self-talk, I think, that goes along with that from my experience. But, the courage, regardless, you're going to need it. The question is how much, and that's going to depend on where you want to go and what you want to do and what it's going to take to get there. But, just don't be afraid to be fearless about it. Don't be afraid to say, it's okay. I'm going to try this. If I fail it, it's okay. But you'll never know unless you try. So no matter what that courage level is, don't let it limit you from trying. And no matter what happens, you'll land. If it turns out a different way, that's okay. But you've learned something at the end of the day because you've tried it no matter what.
Yeah, thank you for that, Melanie. I think the next question is similar to what we had before, but I think slightly different. So I'll just read it out. It says, I have been stopped few times in the meeting where a person do not listen or repeatedly overrides when I talk. Later comes back and apologize when in person and not in meeting. So not during the meeting. So this happened 2 to 3 times with the same person. How do I overcome these kind of situations or handle?
So I would suggest what I said earlier is address it in the meeting, because it sounds like this person doesn't really care that they're talking over you in the meeting, but then they want you to feel like, oh, everything's fine, the relationship is okay, and so they're apologizing afterwards. But the fact that it's happened several times means that it sounds like it's probably not that sincere. So I would just, very politely, next time they try to talk over you, say, I really would love to hear what you have to say, but if you don't mind, I'd like to finish my train of thought, and then I'll turn the floor over to you. And that's going to stop them. They can't then say, no, I'm going to interject right now, right? It puts them in a bad light in front of other people when you have very, calmly and politely said, hey, do you mind if I just keep talking? It kind of leaves them with no choice. And if you do that a few times, one, it points out the fact that they're being rude and they're interrupting you, but you're taking the high ground. You're not actually saying that, but other people are going to realize it. And hopefully after that first, after you call it out, it won't happen again. But if it does a few times, I would just keep doing the same. And eventually they're going to realize that they are looking bad in front of other people by continuously interrupting you, and hopefully the behavior will stop.
Yeah, and I would make the joke in the meeting. I would say, do you want to let me finish, or do you want to apologize later? and just, you could put a smile behind it and joke about it. That's totally fine. But, now you've really shined the spotlight on the bad behavior. But on the one-on-one, be transparent and say, absolutely, I don't appreciate what you've been doing, and this is happening a lot. It's a one-on-one. If he has the least courtesy to do that, you can totally say it as it is. Yeah.
Great, thank you. The next question is for you, Rajni. It says, while I agree it's important, it feels like the objective of getting the male perspective could erroneously be to change how you are. Should that perspective be unfavorable? How does that reconcile with being your authentic self? Can you clarify?
Yeah, of course. So when I said that, make sure you talk to them and get some feedback on how they perceive you, that's just information for you. It does not mean that information has to turn into a direct action of what they said. Not all feedback that you get is actionable feedback, right? So if I was to give you an example of something that doesn't lie core to me, once I got this feedback that you need to be more forceful when you're saying when you're talking about technology. You need to be more forceful in what you're saying. And I polled a couple more people, and I said, "What do you mean forceful? Like, should I bang the table and say, I think this is the database version you should be using, and absolutely this is the way you're going to do it?" And they're saying, "Well, everybody else is, flexing. They're talking about their technology aptitude, and you're not doing that." So after you do a few of these, you figure out, okay, it's not so much about being forceful, it's about the passion. I'm sitting there like this and saying, I think this is the right approach, where I should be saying, I honestly believe that this is the right thing for the firm. And I don't have to pound my fists on the desk to do that. I just have to lean in, be passionate, and believe in what I've said. So you absolutely temper that with your true self. You don't take it as is and do what someone's just asking of you.
All right, thank you for that. The next question, I think we have handled it, but if you have any addition, you can do that. It says, do you have any tips or tricks on managing a heavy home and work demand through COVID while still trying to bring your best self while fatigued? So I think we touched on this a bit. So if anybody has any addition, then
lots of cocktails. That always helps.
All right. Then we go to the next question then. It said, many calls during the virtual world are conference only. What are your tricks for being effective without body language?
The one thing that I've noticed is if you only have just voice to go with and listening only, anything you can do to pay attention to tone and tone of others and to your tone, I think is super helpful. There's probably videos out there that you could learn from, to get tips and in people's tone that goes alongside with body language and other things like that. But if there is any opportunity to pay particular attention to tone, a lot of people will have inflection in their voice. If they're excited, they say something really great, like "Happy Friday," right? Very excited. And then sometimes people just don't have that moment in their tone at all, and they just have one steady tone. But anything you can glean from that, I think would be super helpful.
Okay, right. So our next question says, what do you do if you have been in the same company for 10 years and finding it difficult to move up or move out to a sister company as you don't have a wide experience? How do you break out of this stagnation?
So I think one thing you can do is try to maybe build some additional skills by leaning into other teams or organizations. Find out if there's something that you can contribute to that maybe another team is working on. It might just be a tiny little portion of it, but it'll give you one, additional exposure to other teams, but it may also help you build some other skills. I also would recommend that you join some industry associations because they're often they offer trainings and presentations where you can also pick up additional skills and insights there. That may also give you an opportunity to further build out your network, which you can then leverage to find another position at some point in time.
Great, thank you so much. So we'll go to the next questions because we have 14 minutes left. So let's hope we can finish all these questions that time. It says, as women, like it or not, we have hormones. Definitely true. What is in your toolkit to manage emotions when situations become heated or challenging?
I find that taking some deep breaths help. And that helps for everyone, emotional or not. I'm using that with my 7-year-old as well when he has his moments, and we're working on taking 10 deep breaths. And I find that I've now practiced that for so long that I do it without realizing. So if there's sort of a situation or a conversation that's kind of stressful, I catch myself going, and when I'm on screen, I sort of hide it, but really kind of there is so much value and so much science and research behind just taking those additional breaths. And then also, take every conversation with a grain of salt because, to Melanie's point, if you're on a call, particularly and there's no video, you could be hearing a tone and sort of applying sort of emotion to what you think that person is saying that's not actually there. We lose a lot of that, of the additional conversation and communication when we can't see people. And so someone might be saying something that is kind of seems to be coming across in maybe sort of a negative way, but it might just be the fact that they're saying it in rather a monotone voice, or they're kind of just tired or having a tough day. And so I would always sort of check any assumptions that you're making on what other people are saying. And you can also always circle back with them and say, hey, it sounds like maybe this isn't going well, or it sounds like maybe, kind of relay back what you thought you heard. And let them tell you whether they are having a hard time, or they might be like, oh, no, it was such a rough night. Baby was up, I'm exhausted. So no, everything's great. Sorry about that, But you always kind of want to be checking yourself, and it is hard, and sometimes things get heated, and really kind of making that effort to like take a mental step back, right? If you can't walk away from a conversation or a Zoom or whatever it is, just kind of take that mental step back and give yourself an opportunity to regroup before re-engaging.
Yeah, and I think the virtual world really helps us in this, because sometimes when I find that the conversation isn't going the way, I just do turn off my video. So people don't see all my expressions that are saying, I hate what you're saying right now. But there's another tip I amazingly got from a male mentor. And he said that every time someone spoke about his daughter getting married, he would start crying. And to him, it seemed like so embarrassing that it's like everybody does that. They have children, they get married, they move out. So what he would do is in the morning, he would go to the bathroom, he would think about it, that would make him cry, and he would cry it out. That's it. He's done. It's out of his system and it's gone. So I find that to be immensely helpful. First, recognizing that I'm having a hormonal day, and then just like dealing with it first thing in the morning, get it out of my system, and then take a couple deep breaths, drink some water. And it's totally okay to walk away from a situation if it gets too heated. You can say, let's all just revisit this tomorrow with the clear ahead, and just walk away.
All right, great. Thank you for that, Rajani. The next question says, who are the mainstream leaders you look up to for inspiration? Authors, podcasters, public speakers? Anyone want to help us with that question?
I don't really. I usually get that from, my immediate network. I like that because it keeps it real. I know them and I know where they're coming from.
Yeah, same for me. I take inspiration from people who I have relationships with, whether they're in a mentor position or just leaders that I look up to, or, friends that have, done some amazing things, not really so much public figures.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next question says, I have worked in manufacturing for almost 10 years. It is very male dominated and I have been told not to be so emotional on a few occasions. I can be passionate about specific topics, but not emotional. Have you ever been told this? How did you respond?
I would make a joke about it. I would say, don't get emotional about me being emotional. I think, try to keep your wit at hand. It really helps and especially if you feel like a situation is getting emotional, smile. Smiling releases all these hormones that just help you deal with the stress of that situation. And it kind of just wards away that feeling. I think it helps me when I'm nervous or I'm talking about something that I'm too passionate about. I'll just smile and then it kind of just vanishes. Or listen to some music. That always helps me. Just before a big meeting, I'll listen to some music or something, just clear my head out.
All right, great. Another question. As someone who is fairly young and just starting a family, I have a fear that taking maternity leave slows down a woman's career. And I also feel guilty towards my boss who is relying on me. What are your thoughts on this? And how do you break the news to your boss that you're expecting in the most effective way?
I just gave someone advice on this yesterday. It's a colleague, and I said, how much time are you taking off? And she said, well, 12, but if things are rough, I might come back early. And I was like, you will do no such thing. Absolutely not. Take as much time as you can. If you can take 4, 5, 6 months, do it. I actually was in a position where I was able to take 9 months off. I kid you not, nothing changed when I came back after 9 months. Like, the same cases were going on. People were still having the same conversations. It was like I had never left. It's really, really crazy. And, there's always this little fear of like, well, if I'm gone for that long, are they going to think that they can replace me? Like, am I just redundant? And I've not ever met a woman who has left and taken time and then come back and basically been told like, yeah, well, you know what, we can fill your job while you're gone and we no longer need you. I've literally not ever heard that story. So what you do want to do though is make sure you tell your boss with enough time that they can prepare, because frankly, now that we're all working from home, you buy yourself a little more time because they can't see physically necessarily that, when you start to show, but you want to give your boss enough time to put together a plan for how the work is going to get distributed while you're out. And then make sure you work really closely with those individuals that are going to be taking over so that it's a seamless transition. That's going to put you in really good favor, and it's going to show, one, that you have strong leadership capabilities. Excuse me, even if you're in an individual contributor position, this is still a moment to shine as a leader, to really kind of help and lean in. And then I would say really just like take that time and don't feel guilty. It's a job. it is a job. You're going to be working for a really, really, really long time. We all are. And maternity leave is like such a blip. Even if you're planning to have another one, it's such a blip in time. I would just say take it, go for it, and enjoy it. Really enjoy it.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Kara. We have a question here for you, Melanie. It said, could you please share some insights into owning your own business, being your own boss versus being a leader in Microsoft, and what made you going back to the corporate world? I think she's having some internet connection issues again.
You know what, Joy, skip to the next one and then we can come back if she gets back on.
Yeah, I'll just do that. So it said there is a huge opportunity to increase the amount of women in tech. What is your advice for organizations to encourage female high school students to explore technology or to attract more females to organizations?
Yeah, I think so. JP Morgan has fantastic programs for that. We do mentoring for high school students that are interested in technology. And not only that, I think we started to explore opportunities to be able to get them some small level internship so they can see what the workplace really looks like. So they can be excited about working in technology and being in this space. And see, there's more women now than there were 20 years ago. So when they come in here, they see that there are women leaders and how they're collaborating, and we want to be truly inspirational. So I do recommend these programs are really effective. We've seen a higher intake of people coming in. I do recommend programs like this in other places. Hey, Melanie.
Yeah. Melanie, are you back? You good to go?
I think so.
Okay.
Sorry about that. It kicked out again.
No problem.
I just want to make sure you can hear me, right?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Sorry about that. Very odd. Yeah. So the why part, I would never give up owning my own firm for 10 years with 25 people. What I'd also say is I was starting to get it to a point where I was on the board for the Manhattan Chamber of Commerce, and I was watching companies close their doors because they didn't advance in their technology to keep their business competitive. And I just felt like I wasn't able to do enough on my own and needed to help more people. And the only way that I could do that in mass quantities at millions at a time was to be able to come into Microsoft. It was a bit of a rough decision for me, but this little moral good thing that sits within me said that that was the right thing to do. And so that's why I came back to corporate. I've been back for 5 years now. And but as far as the differences, a lot of the skills are the same. A lot of the skills, that you use in a corporate environment apply in the entrepreneurial space too, when you own your own business. So, I found a lot of that to be the same. You're always going to have clients, whether it's being on your own or working within a company, or clients can be stakeholders. So there are so many similarities along the way that I find that, transition between the two, that, I don't see a ton of difference, between them. The one thing that I will say is it's nice when you work in corporate to be able to take a vacation and actually be able to unplug. That's the one gift that I'll say, because I never really gave myself that gift when I owned my own firm. And part of that's, and I'm sure Kara can resonate with this, you are, as a business owner, you are legally responsible for every single moment that happens when you own your own business. And when you're part of a company, you get to let that rest on the shoulders of others. And so between the vacation and fully being able to unplug and know the world isn't going to end because you took a vacation, and having that, legal hold, responsibility with others, I think would be two gifts that I would say are great compared to owning your own business, from that point of view.
All right. Thank you so much, Melanie. Our time is up and we will have to go now. Thank you so much for everyone who participated, and we're very sorry for not being able to take more questions today, but definitely would like to, you can follow us on our website and look out for more events. We will try to, organize another one so that we can give you more time to discuss. So thank you so much, Rajani. Thank you, Kara. And thank you, Melanie, for those encouraging words and awesome insights. So thank you all to the attendees.